Stevens. So far you've heard from Peter and you've heard from my wife Juju about who Brautigan is to her, and we've heard a little bit from Ian about the actual reality of who Brautigan was, but I think each of us has an idea of who Brautigan really was and what he means to us. And so who was Richard Brautigan in my mind? He was the kid in your college dorm, quiet, unremarkable in his behavior and looks, and yet somehow was able to attract the most beautiful women in the world. The man who turned me on to Richard Brautigan was just such a man. He'd sit in his room making tea, and so many women would come by to see him that it was a bother to him. We called him the Magnet. He wasn't particularly handsome, and his clothes were always somewhat disheveled, and yet his world was in perfect order. We could never figure out what his appeal was, but it drove the girls crazy. We thought maybe it was his air of total indifference, or perhaps he was well endowed. Whatever it was, he had it in spades. And jealously, we all watched as he took these women into his world for a brief encounter, only to gently dismiss them and move on to another. Each time we expected to see them angry at being cast aside so easily. But not only did that not happen, they would almost always quietly accept their fate. They would continue to visit him and even bring other girls over to meet him. As we got to know him, we realized here was a person who was totally centered and at peace with the universe. His world had a particular vibe, a low reverberating vibration, like that of a prayer bell struck long ago, but still emanating a sound not heard unless you were paying close attention. One day I happened to glance at his bookshelf and noticed a number of well-worn books written by someone named Richard Brautigan. I took one of them off the shelf, randomly opened it, and read a poem. Ever since that day, I've encouraged people to do the same, to just grab one of his books and read whatever is on the page you happen to open up to. Somehow it will always be just what you needed to read at that moment in your life. That's the magic of Brautigan. The more you read, the more you find yourself enveloped by a feeling of perfect order. You can't help having a Zen experience. Reading Brautigan becomes a morning tea ritual where the order of events is the nutrition. Over the last 4 decades, Brautigan's books have been my Zen rock garden, a place to go and meditate and renew my soul. In my poetry book, Subliminal Equinox, I've written 3 poems inspired by Brautigan, which I'd like to read for you now. Nirvana and a Taco. I was there for a moment reading Brautigan in a Wendy's. For once not killing time, but taking it into my arms and caressing it, as I know I should do more often. It's tough though. Brautigan books are hard to find these days. Haiku, Gesundheit. In my own little world, it was not raining. It was a warm night somewhere in Tokyo of Richard Brautigan's mind. Soon a feeling came knocking, telling me that I had sat too long at my table, blissfully reading, while others ate their lunches and bitched about their lives. It was raining in Cape Coral, and by smiling in Japanese, I annoyed the waitress. So I walked into the Florida rain, glad to be alive, but mourning the death of a writer who was able to make me feel joy today. And finally, my mind is blank and my pen is still. I guess 2 poems are enough for 1 lunch hour, but as I write this down, I see there are now 3. And now for some Brautigan. I'll start with my all-time favorite Brautigan poem, one of the first ones I ever read, The Memoirs of Jesse James. I remember all those thousands of hours that I spent in grade school watching the clock, waiting for recess or lunch, or to go home, waiting for anything but school. My teachers easily could have ridden with Jesse James for all the time they stole from me. Jules Verne Zucchini. Men are walking on the moon today, planting their footsteps as they were zucchini on a dead world, while over 3 million people starve to death every year on a living one. Earth, July 20th, 1969. In her sweetness where she folds my wounds. In her sweetness where she folds my wounds, there is a flower that bees cannot afford. It is too rich for them, and would change their wings into operas, and all their honey into lonesome maps of a non-existent California county. When she has finished folding all my wounds, she puts them away in a dresser where the drawers smell like the ghost of a bicycle. Afterwards, I rage at her, demanding that her affections always be constant to my questions. Deer tracks. Beautiful sobbing, high-geared fucking, and then to lie silently like deer tracks in the freshly fallen snow beside the one you love. That's all. All watched over by machines of loving grace. I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony, like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think, right now please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics, where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they were flowers spinning blossoms. I like to think, it has to be, of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, and all watched over by machines of loving grace. Karma Repair Kit, items 1 through 4. 1. Get enough food to eat and eat it. 2. Find a place to sleep where it is quiet and sleep there. 3. Reduce intellectual and emotional noise until you arrive at the silence of yourself and listen to it. 4. Discovery. The petals of the vagina unfold like Christopher Columbus taking off his shoes. Is there anything more beautiful than the bow of a ship touching a new world? Widow's lament. It's not quite cold enough to go borrow some firewood from the neighbors. The winos of Potrero Hill. Alas, they get their bottles from a small neighborhood store. The old Russian sells them port and passes no moral judgment. They go and sit under their green bushes that grow along the wooden stairs. They could almost be exotic flowers, they drink so quietly. Another one of my favorites. My nose is growing old. Yep. A long, lazy September look in the mirror says it's true. I'm 31 and my nose is growing old. It starts about a half inch below the bridge and strolls geriatrically down for another inch or so, stopping. Fortunately, the rest of the nose is comparatively young. I wonder if girls will want me with an old nose. I can hear them now, the heartless bitches. He's cute, but his nose is old. Milk for the duck. My sexual image isn't worth a shit. If I were dead, I couldn't attract a female fly. The pill versus the Spring Hill mining disaster. When you take your pill, it's like a mine disaster. I think of all the people lost inside of you. The harbor. Torn apart by the storms of love and put back together again by the calms of love. I lie here in a harbor that does not know where your body ends and my body begins. Fish swim between our ribs, and seagulls cry like mirrors to our blood. We were the 11 o'clock news. We were the 11 o'clock news because while the rest of the world was going to hell, we made love. The curve of forgotten things. Things slowly curve out of sight until they are gone. Afterwards, only the curve remains. Real estate. I have emotions that are like newspapers that read themselves. I go for days at a time, trapped in the want ads. I feel as if I'm an ad for the sale of a haunted house. 18 rooms, $37,000. I'm yours, ghosts and all. A study in roads. All the possibilities of life. All roads led here. I was never going anyplace else. 41 years of life. Tacoma, Washington. Great Falls, Montana. Oaxaca, Mexico. London, England, BK's, Texas, Victoria, British Columbia, Key West, Florida, San Francisco, California, Boulder, Colorado, all led here. Having a drink by myself in a bar in Tokyo before lunch, wishing there was someone to talk to. Tokyo, May 28th, 1976. On the elevator going down, a Caucasian gets at the 17th floor. He's old, fat, and expensively dressed. I say hello. I'm friendly. He says hi. Then he looks very carefully at my clothes. I'm not expensively dressed. I think his left shoe costs more than everything I'm wearing. He doesn't want to talk to me anymore. I think he's not totally aware that we are really going down, and there are no clothes after you've been dead for a few thousand years. He thinks as we silently travel down and get off at the bottom floor that we are going separate ways. Taking no chances. I am part of it. No, I am the total. But there is also a possibility that I'm only a fraction of it. I am that which begins, but has no beginning. I'm also full of shit right up to my ears. Thank you.